السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. مرحبا بكم في قناة تعلم اللغة الإنجليزية مع جنات. ستشاهدون في هذا الفيديو الجزء الثاني والأخير من قصة الهالوين. إذا أعجبك الفيديو فاشترك في القناة وفعل الجرس ليصلك كل جديد، وشكرا. إلى اللقاء.
The Halloween Skeleton in the Closet. Dedicated to Mila, who supports Story Nori on Patreon.
You'll have to ask her yourself about the skeleton in her closet,
she said.
She has made me take an oath of secrecy.
You mean Mum has got an actual skeleton? Eleni shook her head and refused to say anything more on the subject. Later that day, his sister Nafsi got Yogi up to speed, explaining that the skeleton in the closet was just a figure of speech. Yogi knew that if he asked his mother any uncomfortable questions, she would respond by yelling at him to do his homework or tidy his room. So he did not bother trying. But his sister Nafsi was more subtle. When she was alone with her mother in the living room, she said, "Mum, I sometimes have nightmares. They are really scary. How did you get over yours?" "Well, by using healthy thinking and good psychology," said her mother. "What do you mean by that? Can you explain?" Nafsi asked craftily. "Okay, well, this is what really happened to me when I was young," said her mother. "Yep, it's true that my friend Eliza introduced me to a fortune teller. But it wasn't at a fairground. We visited her flat, which was above a shop on the high street. That was my first mistake. I should never have agreed to go there without telling my parents. Anyway, she dealt us tarot cards, which are used for fortune telling." "Oh, she didn't deal you the death card, did she?" asked Nafsi, who thought she could see where the story was heading. "No. In a way, it was worse. She pulled out a card called The Fork in the Road. She said it meant that my life could go in one of two directions, and it was all up to me. If I could dream positive dreams, they would all come true. But if I had bad dreams, they would also come true. And here's the really heavy part. Not just for me, but for all of the world." "How could that be?" Nafsi was intrigued. "Well, she said we each live in our own dimension, and our thoughts come true at a particular stage in our life. The fork in the road card meant that I was at the special stage where my dreams would determine all the world's destiny." "Wow, that's insane!" I knew it was crazy, but I couldn't get the idea out of my head, and Eliza made it worse. On the way home, she told me that I must have positive dreams, or else I, and I alone, would be responsible for everything bad that happened in the world. I was only 12. It was too much for me. I couldn't control my dreams, and I started to see every plague, pestilence and war that anyone could imagine. Eventually, it ended with psychopathic aliens invading the world. I couldn't sleep for weeks on end. I was exhausted and miserable and falling behind at school." "So how did you cure yourself?" asked Nafsi. "Well, fortunately, there was this teacher at school who was interested in hypnosis and psychology. He noticed that I was in a bad way, so we used to have talks about all that I was going through. He gave me some of the best advice I've ever had. He told me to think of something positive and write it out 15 times a day. That way, it would come true." "But isn't that a sort of magic?" "You might think so, but he said not. He said my subconscious would start to notice opportunities. and I would release positive energy from my brain. I would see the world in a better light and make good luck for myself." "And did it work?" asked Nafsi. "Oh, yes. The most remarkable things started to happen to me. I wrote down every day that there will be peace in the world. And you know what happened? When Mr. Reagan was president of the United States, he met Mr. Gorbachev, who was president of the Soviet Union, and they agreed to be friends and not bomb each other." "But that can't have been you, Mum," laughed Nafsi. "Probably not. But at least it felt good and I slept better. So next I tried writing, 'I will get A's in all my exams 15 times a day.' Of course, I started working harder on my homework and I was less tired. So it wasn't all just some supernatural force. But when my results came through, every result was A." "That's incredible," smiled Nafsi. "I'm going to try it too." "You mustn't do it instead of working hard for your goals," added her mum. "You have to put the effort in too, but it will help you achieve the impossible. I'm not superstitious, but I do believe that you can change your own luck and your own world. You have to program your brain to do it. That's all." "That's fantastic, Mum," said Nafsi. And she began to think about all the things she would like to achieve. Her important exams were not due for another 2 years, so she wanted to think of something else. "I know," she thought. "I want to pass my grade 8 at piano." As she was still struggling with grade 2, this was a suitably ambitious test for writing out an affirmation 15 times a day. And when she told Yogi, he was excited too. "What do you want to achieve?" asked his sister.
"Oh, that's easy. We're going to have the best Halloween ever."
"But it's only in 2 days' time."
"Well, if Mum's magic spell doesn't work fast, it's probably not going to work at all," he declared.
"It isn't magic. It's good mental health," insisted Nafsi.
"Oh, whatever."
Yogi diligently wrote out,
"We're going to have the best Halloween ever at the Dutch Hotel."
15 times, and his labours paid off. On the night of the party, Dad allowed the kids to stay up until after midnight, so that they could see him play the saxophone with a jazz band that he had hired. He was dressed in a black boiler suit with a luminous skeleton painted on it. The guests were all in good spirits, dressed up as ghouls, vampires and characters from their favourite horror movies. The kids were hoping to see some of their ghostly friends, and they were not disappointed. Mr. Lucas and Mr. Levi, the Dutch twins who had founded the hotel 200 years ago, were there, and they brought their employees, Maria and Mr. Cooper, to the 21st century for the party. But the strangest thing happened when Yogi ran over to say,
"Trick or treat."
They just vanished. And so when the ghosts appeared again 10 minutes later, the kids resisted the temptation to approach them. But there was another ghost who caused even more of a stir. His name was Mackenzie, an old butler from years gone by, who looked about 100 years old. He kept appearing in a chair next to Eleni, and disappearing again a few minutes later. Eleni, who was dressed as the Wicked Witch of the West, grew more and more impatient with him, and said,
"You don't fool me with your trick or treating."
The fourth time he appeared, he leant over to say something in her ear. That was the final straw, so she stood up and gave him a good beating with her handbag. This caused the kids a great deal of laughter, especially as Mackenzie's costume split in half, revealing the old butler in his underpants. Both the kids saw what really happened, but the other guests could only see an old witch thrashing a chair with her handbag and shouting,
"You should know better at your age."
All in all, the Halloween party was enjoyed by everyone. The faithful chef put on a magnificent feast of ghoulish but delicious food, fit only for the best event in London, and Alan's solo was a success. And although the family missed Delaney when she flew back to Cyprus in November, they were also quite relieved. And I'm delighted to dedicate this Halloween episode of the Dutch Hotel to Mila, whose family kindly supports Story Nori on Patreon. Her mother Anna writes, "Thank you so much for recording these amazing stories. Our daughter Mila is obsessed with them and has been listening to them on repeat. Her favourites are definitely The Wicked Uncle School Days and The Ungolden Fish. She also loves the Dutch Hotel. Thank you so much, Mila, for supporting us on Patreon. And to all our listeners, have the best Halloween ever."